the NCAA Division I Council met, I believe it was yesterday, and they changed a lot of rules. So there's 3 specific rules they changed. And I want to go through each of them, but then we'll first talk about which one's the most important. So the first rule they changed, they dropped the 25 player per year scholarship limit. So the NCAA's rule was you can never have more than 85 scholarship players at a time, and you can never sign more than 25 players per year. They got rid of the 25 players per year and just said 85. You just can never have more than 85, and it's your choice on how you want to go about that. The second change is the transfer portal window reduced to 45 total days per year for every sport. Now, it's different when those windows open. There's 15 days here, maybe 30 days here, 20, whatever. But it can't be more than 45 days per year. You have, if you're an athlete, 45 days to make a decision on the transfer portal window. And then the next one is they have banned photo shoots on unofficial visits. That Gucci Mane song photo shoot came into my mind from like 2009. But which one of these is the biggest deal, Jero?
Well, I can tell you, in my opinion, the least is the transfer portal, for the simple fact that most of those kids know they're transferring but like the portal doesn't open and they're like, oh, I want to transfer now. Like, you're transferring way before. So I would say the portal is definitely the least. And then honestly, the scholarship, the 25 limit hasn't been enacted since COVID, I believe. I would probably say that's the biggest change, because if you have a 25 person signing limit, you don't get what Dion did at Colorado. So I think you expedite kind of reviving programs when you can sign more than 25 guys and kind of rebuild programs. And in all honesty, for a team like Tennessee or a lot of SEC teams, I don't think you're often approaching that 25 limit anyway. I think you're usually about 19, 20, 21 kids per class anyway. So I think that's probably the biggest overall, but I don't think that affects Tennessee as much. The unofficial photo shoots, I'm not sure what the point of changing that was. I don't know who was affected by getting photos taken on unofficial visits. I feel like that was partially like a motivator for kids to take unofficial visits.
Yeah, I think that might be the big thing. They just don't want the unofficial visits. But like, I think kids take unofficial visits to help. One, Dave and I talked about this. You should be allowed to take as many visits as you want to try to determine. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be pampered by the school every time you go, but you should be allowed as many visits as you want to make your decision. They're taking these unofficial visits because they want to. I mean, they want to make sure they want to be sure about a decision they make. I mean, this is their future. Like we're sitting there criticizing kids when they're waffling about things. This is a big deal, and it's your future. I mean, for every Tennessee fan that might complain about that, guys, Peyton Manning didn't commit to Tennessee until January of '94, a month before National Signing Day was when he committed. And I think he visited during the '94 ice storm, like 2 weeks before. And so, he never even had been in Neyland Stadium for a football game, but he just had a connection and felt something right about the place. It's so a little bit of history lesson for you guys here. I'm with you. The scholarship limit's the biggest one, and it hasn't been around since 2019. And Dion definitely took the most advantage of it. There's going to start being a question of what it does is it resets the market for coaches. You're not getting 4 years to turn around a program anymore. You might get 2 with the scholarship limit, with no scholarship limit, because it's going to be like, oh, you can just bring in the talent you want. So quick history lesson. Joe, you might not know this, but Johnny Majors won his national title at Pitt because there were no scholarship limits. Now, Johnny Majors takes over Pitt in 1973 and has the largest signing class in history. I think he had close to like 45, 50 guys or something like that. Included in there was Tony Dorsett, and just signed every single elite player he possibly could. The next year, the NCAA put in the scholarship limits. Well, that whatever class at Pitt won the national title in 76. And Tennessee goes and hires him in 77. And the scholarship limits are in place, which obviously the scholarship limits require you to be a lot more meticulous with how you go about offering and things like that with your class. Well, because Johnny Majors had to be more meticulous, it actually hurt him a little bit. And he never did replicate the success he had at Tennessee that he had at Pitt. But he had the success at Pitt because he signed a gigantic class in 1973. And he was never able to do that again. And that created... So I actually think the scholarship limit is the Johnny Majors rule because of what he did at Pitt in 1973. And so it's kind of funny how that works out, because that class, him doing that, raised his profile enough for Tennessee to hire him back home in 1977 and totally altered the landscape of Tennessee football history. So just kind of an interesting tidbit about that. I bet you didn't know that, did you?
I did not know that, but I do know that now that Deion did what he did at Colorado, you won't see coaches like Billy Napier have the leash that they're going to have in the future, because everybody's going to be compared to him. I feel like it's kind of changed the landscape, and now that there's really no signing limit, it's just, the floodgates are open for, if coaches don't win or in 1, 2, 3 years, just hire another guy and see if he can do it.
Yeah, I agree. And also with Deion at Colorado, you're right. Billy Napier's leash is doubly short, because don't think for a second Florida's not going to try to open a checkbook for him now. And given the fact that he went into Florida State, that'd be the best coup they could ever pull off, just to get Deion as head coach.
Yeah, and I mean, the loss at Kentucky and Billy Napier's comments to the media, it does not seem like things are going well in Gainesville anymore. Even after the win to Tennessee, like, I thought that would at least buy him another year, because you beat Tennessee at home, stadium was full, and then you just kind of go to Lexington and do the complete opposite. It's crazy what they have going on.
Yeah, Florida's a better team at night. This is all about when teams practice. You know this. Tennessee practices. They practice at like 7, don't they?
So I think they start meetings at 7 and then practice at 9.
Yeah, so Tennessee's up early and practicing. And Florida, I think, does the late afternoon practices. And so when you play a noon game at Kentucky, who also practices in the morning, that's going to favor them. But when you play a home game against Tennessee at night, that's going to favor you. On top of that, Tennessee's banged up with Cooper Mays. The swamp is imposing. Florida put everything they had into that game because they knew that, like, Billy Napier's career was hinging on that game. And so I think that they literally just utilized everything they had to make sure they won that game. And so I think now coaches just aren't. Look, who's the last successful coach that by his second year did not at least have 9 wins one season?
Jimbo still has a job, doesn't he?
Yes,
did he have
but
9 wins?
Florida State, he did his second year. I mean, but at Texas A&M,
I don't think
that
did
up.
he?
That's a good question. His second year,
but also his buyout is so much that you have to give him more than 2 years.
Right. That's a very good point.
And you give him the benefit of the doubt because you're in the SEC West and all of that. But I mean, Billy Napier should be able to sneak out 8-9 wins with his schedule.
That's true. Jimbo did win a national title, though, I think, which bought him a lot of leeway at A&M, and he went 9-4 his first year, and so that helped. This is another Johnny Majors story. Yeah, Johnny Majors was 4-7 his first year, 5-5-1 his next year, 7-5, and then 5-6. And everybody was wanting him fired, but he had bought so much leeway for winning the national title at Pitt and being a Tennessee guy that a lot of people let him. He had the Tennessee fans don't like to hear this, but Johnny Majors had the longest leash of any head coach in history, and nobody would get the leash he got today because he didn't have a top 25 finish until his 9th year on the job at Tennessee. So yeah, Jimbo, you're right. Jimbo's just kind of muddying along, but look, Texas A&M did not hire him to muddy along and have the SEC West to be the excuse. They hired him to be Nick Saban at Texas A&M.
And now Texas is entering the SEC, so Jimbo no longer can just get kids because he's in the SEC. Because before, like for the longest time, you just go to like a Texas high school and say, hey, 4-star prospect, we're in the SEC, Texas is not, you should come here. Now Texas is in the SEC, Texas is having success, and A&M is just kind of, like you said, muddying along. I mean, obviously Connor Wegman got hurt, now you have Max Johnson, but what was Wegman doing before that was going to like stroke confidence in A&M?
Yeah, not much. As a matter of fact, I'm questioning Jimbo Fisher's and Bobby Petrino's acumen because I watched Max Johnson against Arkansas and he was better than Connor Wegman. I'm just going to be honest.
But also, when you watch Max Johnson's film at LSU, it was very, 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 very up and down. Like he'd have a super good game, and the next game would be like 3 picks and a fumble. And so I wonder if they also saw that too. I just don't think they had a choice, really. And I mean, you had to go in the portal and get Max Johnson. The A&M situation is wild because they're always at the top of recruiting boards and you have the talent. And then also, speaking of Bobby Petrino, just that hire in general kind of raises questions about Jimbo Fisher. So, yeah, they did not hire him to do what he's doing, but I also don't know if they can afford to fire him yet.
Yeah, it's true. And also they have the NIL budget that should allow them to get, and maybe this new scholarship rule will actually help them. They could just sign a bunch of guys in one class with a bunch of NIL money. the one thing I would say, I mean, I've had a joke. A&M is the Mets of college football because you're talking about a program that has all the resources to have had multiple national titles and be as storied as the top 10. And I don't think they have one national title. And so it's kind of hilarious to look at. Like they are the most underachieving program in the history of programs in college football, or maybe even any sport, because there's no reason for them to not have been a blue blood for a long time.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Why doesn't A&M just sign 30, 35 kids and then see who sticks? Because if you sign that many, somebody's got to be good. I mean, you're signing blue chip prospects every year, and it's not turning into wins. And I mean, obviously, you don't expect them to beat Alabama every year, but once every 4 years, maybe you beat Alabama. LSU should be a game they consistently win. It's just schools like that, and then they always have a dud. Like whenever for what Jimbo Fisher is being paid, I would expect, or it would be expected, I would say, for A&M to be favored in Neyland Stadium with the roster he has and what he's getting paid. But I would highly doubt that A&M is going to be favored when they come to Neyland Stadium.
Oh yeah, we talked about this last night before Alabama this week. The early line is A&M by 7, or I'm sorry, Tennessee by 7, which is I think a really high line in favor of Tennessee.
Yeah, but I think it's probably accurate with the way where A&M's at right now. Now, for what Jimbo's getting paid and the talent they have on that roster just by straight recruiting rankings, it shouldn't be that way. But that's the way it is, and I think that's why, I mean, Jimbo's struggling over there.
Yeah, it is. It is. And some are just overachieving, or some players are just underachieving. Now, Walter Nolan has finally, it seems like, reached his potential, and I think Tennessee is going to – I think that was an NIL move for him to go to A&M, honestly. But so I'm not going to say –
I also think he was from Texas too, wasn't he? I'm pretty sure he moved from Texas to here.
Okay, that could make sense because he spent a lot of time in Memphis, Chattanooga, and Knoxville. So it was –
Yeah, I don't – but, yeah, I agree with you, and he was the one that was trying to, like, draw up transfer rumors too. So – even though he's reached his peak, it's not really like the program is, he wasn't a quiet guy, put his head down and worked. He was posting on Instagram about thinking about transferring and stuff like that. So even though he is reaching his potential, you still just it doesn't feel like the program is where it should be with them.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like players care about being there. You're right. That seems the culture. But Jimbo Fisher did say, they're not going to sign the 35 to 40 guys because I don't know if you know this, Jimbo Fisher, when Texas A&M was losing last year, he said this is good for us on the recruiting trail because we can get guys who want to play immediately now. And I'm like, wow, smart. The more you know. Lose games on purpose.
Reverse psychology. Load up 5 stars and then lose to get more 5 stars and then try to win. I mean, it doesn't make much sense. But I agree with you. It just doesn't feel like they're where they're supposed to be. And when I think of Texas A&M and you think of like the big alumni base and like Aggies and the band and the midnight yell and all that stuff, the number one thing is like they're proud of Texas A&M no matter what. Like no matter how crazy it looks on the outside. And then your players aren't even like proud of Texas A&M. It's just not, it's an indictment on your program, really.
It is. It's a culture thing. And by the way, there was a culture problem at Florida State before Jimbo Fisher left. So this is 2 places he's been where there's been a culture problem. So psychologically that's an issue.